Hi guys. My kids keep on telling me that I need to show my face on these videos, so here I am. Here's my face. We are going to be doing a drawing of these lovely pieces of glassware. I'm going to turn off this light so you can actually see my drawing. And I'm going to go through this drawing with you step by step. Hopefully things will not fall over. They might. Okay. I put a little white backing on them to kind of help with the drawing because it's hard. It gets confusing with glass if you have a lot, kind of going on in the background. So if you can, put a little something. Hopefully that stays up for me. I'll pull it forward so you guys can kind of see it. I'll move this forward. Move this forward. Kind of see what I'm working with. I may just do one, but I kind of wanted to show both of them just to see what, we're working with. Probably the bigger one might be a little bit better. So one of the things we're going to start with is just the ellipse, the idea of doing an ellipse. And you can, and remember, this is your practice. So you can do it, on the side, and, we're just doing a quick drawing, right? So, well, not quick, but maybe 45 minutes. So one of the things you want to practice a little bit is the ellipse, okay? And the ellipse, you want to be able to kind of keep it nice and loose. You notice my pencil is like this. I'm going to show you how that ellipse looks. Just a little ellipse like that. And you want to be able to have kind of a nice continuous line that's really smooth. And you notice, like with a lot of my drawings, that this is, very loose. It's got a lot of lines. I'll erase back the ones I don't like. And I, when I kind of try to refine it, but we're just doing the sketch first. So, actually, I started it that way, and this is tall, so maybe I'll turn it that way. That might be better. Okay, so I'm just going to start, with practicing, this ellipse. Now, one of the things you want to think about when you're doing any drawing, okay, is that if you can see, if you're kind of taller on a piece of glassware, like if I were standing up, the ellipse would be really big and round, kind of like that. And then as we kind of bring our point of view lower and lower, the ellipse gets smaller and thinner, right? So with this one, I'm kind of a little bit medium, just from my point of view. So if I were really kind of low and let's say it was a really tall vase and up really high, that ellipse would be very narrow. And since it's, kind of, I'm above it and I can look into the vase, then it's about like that. It's kind of in between. Okay. So we have that nice, loose sketch of that top ellipse. And then the other thing I'm going to do, just to kind of help myself out, is I'm going to draw just a center point. Now again, all of this is very loose, and this was going to help me with the height of our drawing. So the height of our drawing, we want to see how big it is compared the width of it across the top. So you can see my pencil. I'm trying to measure it using my pencil like this. And then I bring it down and I say it's about 1.5 of the pencil. So I do the same thing on the drawing, and that's like a proportion trick that a lot of artists use. So I say, okay, well, that's how wide I made that ellipse. And if it's 1.5 down from that top point right there, I go down 1 and I go down about another half. So that's how tall I want to make this, because that's the right proportion for the width of the top. Okay. And so that's going to be my bottom point. And then I'm going to do the bottom ellipse. Now, remember what I told you about how these get bigger. So actually we should turn it like this. So the farther away it goes down from me, the more open the ellipse becomes. So this ellipse on the bottom is going to be a little bit more open. It's going to be a little wider. But we look at the side of the vase or the vase, and it's definitely smaller down here than it is up here. Okay? So we're going to do that, make it a little more open, but we're going to make it smaller in this direction, in the side to side. Now that center line, what that does is it really helps me keep things lined up, because with glassware, it's, you know, symmetrical on both sides. So that's really important. So now that I got that kind of loose and I'm happy with that, I want to kind of work that a little bit better. So that's nice and loose. And then I might do one just in the middle someplace where you think it starts to change. So this kind of goes in just a tiny bit right here. And I'm going to say right about there, this comes out. Now, whatever glassware you're going to be working with, it could, you know, come out and in, or it may just go straight up. It depends on what you have at home. Or like this glass is another good example. This is the widest point. And then right here at the neck is the smallest point, and there's a lot of different points. Like this might be the widest on the volume area, and then this gets a little smaller. So you may have to, you know, almost stack a series of ellipses. Now, with this, since I have like one point here, a smallest point, and a largest point, that's probably all I need. And I encourage you guys to do something kind of simple with yours so that it's not too crazy. Now it gets a little more narrow here, so this, we're not going to have it the same size as this, but we're going to have it a little bit more narrow than that. And then remember our rule with the ellipse. The farther away from us it is, okay, the bigger it is. So it's not going to be as big as this, because this is the farthest one away. But it's not going to be as narrow as this. So something in between. You want to play with that. And you see how loose I am with that. It's a little bit loose. Might be a little wide. Should maybe get a little more narrow. But that's fine, because I'm still just sketching. And then this becomes the part where we just bring down that line. And the really tough part is bringing it down the same on the other side. It's actually super challenging to get them the same on either side. Sometimes it's helpful if you kind of just flip your drawing and actually do it exactly the same way, upside down. Well, it's kind of okay. It's getting there. That's our start of our glassware drawing. And now I'm going to really start. See, now I've got kind of the basic proportions and the shapes. They're in this piece of glassware. There is no inside ring. There is one here and there is one here. And then there's a kind of a smaller one we can visualize right here on the bottom where the thickness of the glass kind of shows through. So there's that. And I may do that one. But what I do want to have is my super duper eraser. So I'm going to get rid of, so now that I've got this, you know, inside, I've got my center point. I'm going to erase some of my helpful lines that got me to here. So the center point, I can bring it back if I feel like I need it for any reason. And just get them out of the way so it doesn't get visually confusing as you're starting to add things to it. And we needed to have them. They're not mistakes. They're just lines that we used, and now we're done with them. Okay? So now we have, you know, our general vase in the general proportions that we have. Let's see. I think I almost need a slightly bigger piece of white paper. I'm going to get a giant one. Because it'd be nice to see this full shadow, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. I'm not as worried about that with today's drawing. Okay, so now I'm looking at this, and I want to start to do what we're calling observation. So observation is really looking at the different aspects of the object that we have in front of us. So one of the things I notice is that I have a very dark lip over here and a little bit of a dark lip over here. I noticed, as I mentioned before, the thickness of the glass right here. And I also am noticing back here where, and it's hard to probably see in the video, but there is a bit, if you're looking at your own piece of glass as you're doing this, you'll see the kind of distortion of the bottom of the glass on the back side. So it doesn't quite look like it just loops around in a perfect circle. It gets distorted back here through the glass, which is the interesting part of it. And then I also see like there's some lines on the sides of different items, whether it's the wall or another object or the paper back there, of reflection of where we're seeing the light kind of come in. and also where I'm seeing the paper on the back side. In that you can see in the video. In the video you can see how things are getting distorted as it goes behind the glass, including the paper. Okay, so what I want to do is start to refine this, and I'm going to have kind of a double lip on the top. Super important to have a sharp pencil when you're doing this kind of thing. It makes a huge difference, and I often will have a couple erasers. Like I have my big blunt one that I like to use. That's big and kind of gets rid of a lot of lines, and then I have, you know, the one on the pencil, but I also have like a little pencil eraser, which is a really handy tool. Okay, I'm just trying to kind of clean up my lines so I can see what I'm doing just with the top. I'll get to the bottom in a minute. And so what I'm also noticing is that there's a line that comes along the bottom here that shows the thickness of the glass, and then it disappears right about here. I'm going to move the video just ever so slightly so you can see where I'm pointing this to. Okay, I want to make sure you can still see my drawing. So like there's a line that starts kind of on the bottom here, goes around, and that picks up on the back side over here. And then the line that's on the top kind of goes around on the top surface. So you have to really look at where these lines are leading. Almost like if you've ever, oops, my pencil lead went on me. Almost like if you've ever drawn a ribbon. I don't know if you guys have ever done that. So if you draw a ribbon, and you know a ribbon kind of has a line that goes like this, and if you show the thickness of the ribbon, and then it comes around because it's coming around as if this were here, and then we pick it up there. So this looks like a ribbon going around. This is very similar to that concept. So that's the ribbon, right? And this is a very similar concept to a smaller lip or smaller ribbon right along the edge. Okay, so really important to kind of keep that dialed in. I'm trying to keep this timed as well so that I don't overtax you guys. Okay, and that goes right here. And then we have the thickness of the lip. And what happens is that disappears. It disappears right here. And then we pick it up again right here on the back side. It's a little hard to draw when I'm holding it up in the air like that, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So that kind of picks up that thickness. And that's an important distinction when you're working with a drawing of glass. And so then I'm going to bring this over here and do this side. And then I'll do the thickness of the lip. And if you don't get the thickness of the lip exactly to what it is on the glass, it's kind of okay. What you want, what's really important, is that you're getting the concept of how it moves and how you're seeing it. Okay, that's really important. And I also think one thing that is really important is how fluid your ellipse is. Like, is it really nice and kind of round? It doesn't have flat spots here. It doesn't get too pointy here. Okay, those are really important distinctions when you're doing an ellipse. Okay, so now you can see that this thickness comes right through here. This line follows right through and then comes along on the bottom. This bottom line over here follows through and then comes along on the bottom. So that's, you know, the thickness of the lip. And then we're going to draw a slightly more distinct line to bring down to the bottom. Okay, and on the bottom, what's really cool about this, and as you see it really close, I don't know if I can zoom, can I? No, it won't let me zoom. Oh well. What you notice about this is that you have where the bottom of the glass is, but then you have a lot of reflected light in particular because I have a light right above it, but also it's like you got to look at the distinction of where the glass stops and where the reflection starts. So, this lead is giving me some trouble. All right. So again, I'm going to bring this, making sure you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to angle this down just a little bit. There. You can see what I'm up to. Okay, so now I have a more distinct line, because remember the first one we did with the fruit, we started with these loose shapes, and then we did this outside contour line. This is what we're also doing with this. I just want to make it a slightly more distinct line. Bring the eraser in just a little. Just kind of clean up some of the line. Okay. And I'm also going to just lighten up the back. I'm not completely getting rid of the back, but just lightening it up a little bit so that we really can see the outline shape of this. Now, what I want to do is I want to create a line here that shows the thickness of the bottom of the glass. Okay. So that comes up not too far. And it is an ellipse, but we only see half of it. Okay. So that's going to be right about here. And you want to see right where it comes in on the side. And you want to almost pretend it's going all the way around so you get that same kind of fluid line. But it shows up differently on the back side in the distorted area. So we're just adding that little bit to give us the thickness to the lip. I'm going to bring this line down just a snap and erase through here to make it slightly more distinct, like that. Okay, and now what I'm seeing is I'm seeing kind of a smaller, distorted, like elongated circle. It's not quite an ellipse. And it comes up to about here. And the way it goes around, it's in from the sides. I'll give a little erase right there just to make it slightly more distinct. If you really look at this glass, you can see this. So that's the bottom and how it looks. So you can see it's like, it's not starting from the outside edge, even though that's truly where it is. We're just seeing kind of the inside of where the glass is. Okay? And that's the bottom. And it actually has two distinct lines. Okay? One, I'm going to start out here. One's a little more distinct like this. And this, there's one on the right side that's a little heavier. It looks like there's more shadow in that one. And it almost disappears, like right here. It gets very, that second line gets very light through there. So that's my second line. And then this one is our more distinct one. And we're a little bit shaded through here on the bottom. So I'm going to shade that just a little. And there's a little bit of extra shading right through here. Kind of almost a slightly moon shape that I'm seeing in there. There's also a little highlight that I'm noticing on the bottom. And the thing with glass is you get a lot of that kind of reflective gleam. So that we're going to do our best to capture as much of that as we can, but it's it does take a little bit to capture that. So you can kind of see how I shaded the bottom. Okay, and then now what I'm seeing just on the bottom, because there's a lot happening on the bottom, I'm seeing, again, that reflective light. So there's certain gray areas and certain areas that are more white. And I'm going to attempt to draw that in just a little bit. And I have a little bit of a shadow on the bottom that's caused by the actual glass. Okay. There's a little shadow, kind of reflected light. It starts over on the shadow here. Okay. And then there's these kind of gray areas that have an odd shape to them. You want to be careful on how much pencil you put into this. And I want to make sure to leave a light area in here, because there's a definite highlight right along here. So I'm going to draw a specific line right in there. And then just do a little bit of shading, not much, just to kind of give me an indication of that space. Okay, so that's kind of what it is. The other thing is I'm going to, and this is also the case, it's not so much what I see, but I'm going to really highlight, or I shouldn't say highlight, darken that bottom edge, because I want it to be clear that that is the bottom. And I'm going to bring that right up the side, even though it might not be as dark in the real thing. We do that with the fruit as well, because I think it really shows. Really shows that kind of distinction between what is the object and what is your background. Okay, so I got some of that, and now I have some things in here where I have the paper in the back. So the paper is really goofy looking, and I'm not going to worry too much about that, but just to give you an indication, the paper makes a shape that kind of goes up a little like that. So it looks a little weird. We're not worrying about it with today's drawing, but that's something that we're gonna develop as we put like fruit or something behind it. Because as you see, when you're looking at this, as you put something behind it, it gets a little bit distorted, okay? And that's a really important thing that we're going to play with, is that distortion of how it kind of comes in and out of the space. We're not going to use scissors, we're going to use fruit. But so I just want to kind of give myself, where are my highlights, my strong highlights? I'm going to say I have a stronger highlight right here on the left-hand side and a little bit of shading in here. And then I probably have a couple of kind of gleams over here of reflective light. So I'm going to do just a little. We're not going to worry too much about shading these. I'd rather you guys practice doing a few different types of glassware while you do this, as opposed to worrying about making this one, you know, like perfectly shaded at this point. It's more important to kind of play with that. So we'll just do a little bit on this side. You can tell I'm just curving my lines ever so slightly to show the shape of the glass, so just a tiny bit, and I'll bring that all the way down because there's a fairly strong shadow right through about here. I have another drawing that I had done for Studio Art 2, and I'd like to show you guys that one as well. And that one's a finished one. And then I have a similar one over here on the side. Don't be afraid. You don't have to keep your drawing, or you've noticed that I've kind of reoriented mine several times. You know, if it's more comfortable for you to turn your drawing to get this kind of curved line, do whatever you gotta do. It's fine. It's a little lighter at the top on this side because we have more of a highlight over on this side. And this one distinctly kind of comes right to about here, right about there, right? So, I'll show you when we get through that. Okay, so I have just a little bit of shading on that one, right? We also have the shading kind of on the inside, so we'll get to that as well. And you may do some areas where you kind of do a little shading through here on the inside of the glass, and that may come through on the back side of the glass as you're kind of working the drawing. Okay, so that's also something you can think about. And then what we want to do is, I remember we talked about using a blending stem, but I suggested the possibility of using a Q-tip, so I brought a Q-tip this time. So if you want to try to use a Q-tip to blend some of your lines, you know, give yourself, you know, a little bit of that kind of shaded area. And then it's kind of light in here, but not totally. Okay, and that helps. That really does. Makes a difference. And actually, the Q-tip works fabulously. We love it. We love a Q-tip. Okay, so that's a start. There's still a little bit of shading. I'm going to say right here. There's a spot that really needs it right along here, just to show this highlight along the left side. So I want to make sure that I kind of add that in. Again, I'm still trying to curve it a little, so if any of those lines come in, okay, that we really, they're reflective of the object. So curved, this is a curved object, so we're doing curved shading lines. Okay, and I'm going to do my little Q-tip trick here. I didn't put too much lead on that last little band because I don't want it too dark. And here's the thing, well, this is what I think I noticed the most last year with students trying this. It's hard to think about your glass in shades of gray because it's a glass, so you don't think about it in shades of white or black or gray. But you got to try to look at it a little bit like that, because there's areas that are darker and they're reflective of what's going on, you know, around the glass, because the glass is truly transparent. Okay. This needs just a little more through here on the bottom, just to kind of really show there's a really strong line right on the bottom that shows that. Okay, so that's pretty good, and I like that. The other thing I want to do is I want to show a little bit of the gleam on the top edge. So, let me see here. It's kind of grayed through here. So I'm going to give it a little softness on that top edge. And I'm going to give just a little bit of that right through here on the top. So it doesn't look like it just starts and stops. And then I want to show just a highlight of a gleam. And that is really done with the eraser. It kind of can only be done. It's really hard for anybody to plan and just leave it white. And I think it's really important to try and do it with the eraser. The eraser, again, is, you know, also, you know, a mark maker. So I really want to kind of show a couple of spots that are very light. And sometimes you have to go back and give yourself a line. So that's a little bit of a gleam. We also have one that rides a little bit low like this, just below that. And then there's a really strong one right here. If you really look at this, there's spots, you know, that you'll see the light kind of coming through. And it really gives it a sense of transparency. And you say, okay, well, it's light there, but it's really shaded right through here. And it is. There's a good shading kind of spot on that left side. And I could spend a lot of time, you know, going through that and kind of getting that just the way I want. Okay? And now we're going to do just a little bit of time on the shadow. I'm going to turn my paper to give myself a slightly larger shadow, because this shadow is pretty darn interesting. So what's nice about this, we got this light coming in from the top. I'm going to pull it just a little bit forward so you can kind of see that. And then we have a great shadow that's coming right through here. So I had started it a little bit earlier, but I'm going to kind of bring it out. And this becomes a little bit more of a fluid part of the drawing. There's a really strong white spot right here, and then the rest is gray, and it all kind of curves. So, let's see here. We have a spot that comes out here. It comes out like that. And then trying to draw and look so you guys can see what I'm doing. So that's the only way this makes sense. And then it's strong right through there. And I'm doing it just loose, just like when we sketch. You know, like when I first was sketching this and I was doing ellipses like that. Just going to do the shading kind of loose till I feel like I've got a good handle on it. And then I have that light spot that's right there. And that's right there. I want to kind of leave that as best I can. And then we have these curved lines. And this is just the light reflecting through the glass. And they're coming around like this. Glass creates some like amazing reflections. Okay, and it really kind of almost goes, it gets bigger. It almost goes like to about right here. And then it probably goes beyond what I actually have because my white paper limits my amount of shadow. Really having white paper underneath makes a huge difference in your ability to make this this type of shadowing. Otherwise you just can't see it. And this has a little more here. Kind of bells out just a little bit more than I'm showing. Okay. And it gets very fair out here. So I want to draw a few more lines so I can use my Q-tip and kind of blend this. This is shadow, so this is going to be soft. There's some distinct areas, but you're going to start off with just a really soft look. And it's less distinct than our actual object. So I've got my lines here, and this is what I'm looking at. You guys can't see everything that I'm looking at in the video, I'm sure, because I don't know if that all comes through in the video. But if you're working on your own, along with me, as you should be, you see your own kind of interesting reflections that are going to be unique to the object that you're drawing. So this is like so. I'm kind of doing this, and as I look, I think, oh, it's a little darker on the inside here, and that connects a little bit more. I'm almost drawing with this Q-tip. Not almost drawing, I am drawing. So I'm giving kind of this really lovely, almost seashell shaped shadow. So that's the shadow that I'm getting from it. One of the things that I think is really nice, again, is using that eraser. There's one really bright white spot on this shadow that I think is super important to highlight. And then the other ones are just a little softer. Again, I can use the eraser to kind of build those back in again. Because once you do the smudge, it's kind of hard to maintain a more distinct line. So you want to use kind of them back and forth so you can really show the definition of your shadow. So that's looking pretty good. That's looking about like what I want. All right. And then I want to show you one other drawing. Grab it for you guys really quick. It might be. I think it actually might be in the sketchbook. Bear with me, guys. I've been doing a lot of drawing. Actually, this one that I had shown as a sample earlier, this was a small piece of glass that I was doing earlier, which is a really nice one. And I think I do have the other one to show you, which is a blue glass drawing that I did. I added some other things to it. I was adding like a map and some collage paper, but this is the glass that I did, and this is the long reflection, and so you can kind of see, especially right through here, you know, how the reflected light goes through the glass and kind of casts this really interesting shadow. So let me kind of go back to where we were. for your homework, I'd like you to do 2 glasses. And it would be great if you could do 2 different ones that are very, you know, very much like this. Keep it simple and just really work on those ellipses and keeping it symmetrical, adding some shading, doing a little bit of this highlight, and think just a little bit on the bottoms of the glass, you know, and through here, a little bit about that distortion that we're seeing in the glass, because we're going to come back to that. All right. Thank you guys for hanging with me. And again, to show my face, I will see you guys in class.